Hello and welcome to the Bravo Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Midwinter, and I am joined by Fergalicious, Dylan Ferguson. How's it going?
It's going fine.
Awesome.
Let it roll. Let's hear that a bit more.
Fergie's going to slap us with a copyright suit here if we play any more of that. We're talking about Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and Real Housewives of New York City. I want to dive into Real Housewives of Salt Lake City because that was the most compelling for me.
It's pretty intense.
Do you want to give us a bit of a summary of what happened on this episode?
Sure. So it's built around Angie's throwing her 25th anniversary party.
Who are you? I am from ancient Greece.
Where does that come from? What was that? What are you?
I have no idea.
Is that like Clash of the Titans or something? Right. So the theme of her party is mafia bosses' wives, I guess. A bit of a chaotic theme, not very clear, but carries it through with her adorable dork energy. And mostly this becomes a stage for Whitney to confront Lisa over the story about her jewelry being cheap bullshit that she's been overpriced, which apparently came through Lisa. So that's kind of the central crux of it. Oh, and of course we've got a bit of a love triangle with Brittany and her on again, off again Jared Osmond.
Blinky, yeah. Yeah, I think that about covers it. What questions do you have coming out of this?
I mean, where does Whitney go from here in terms of like her defending her business and trying to take a full-on frontal attack against Lisa? Like where does this go from here? What's her path to victory? What does that look like? Like what does success look like for her? Is there some way that she can take Lisa down over this and actually smear her, or is this just something that she's going to have to end up backtracking? Because I don't know how we're going to get any kind of closure on this, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good question. It feels like she's just using this for gameplay. Like she does not seem like she actually cares about this being out there. She's just kind of using this as a piece to focus conflict around. I don't know. At least that's my read on it. I thought it was pretty interesting that she shifted her target to Lisa from Meredith. Mm-hmm. I think that is probably the smart move for her socially, because there's already a lot of conflict that Lisa has. She's got like a lot of balls that she has to juggle right now. And I think that it'll be a lot easier for Whitney to rally people against Lisa as opposed to Meredith, who doesn't really have the same conflict with the rest of the girls.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think we already saw Whitney try to play like Meredith and Lisa against each other in Milwaukee, and it didn't work. And then in light of that, it's interesting that like one of the first things we see in the episode is Whitney taking her information to Meredith that she's going to use against Lisa, and kind of like testing the waters and being like seeing how Meredith reacts to this. And of course Meredith's reaction is basically like, oh, be careful. Like I'm not sure that you're on a sound footing as you think you are. Mm-hmm. Taking this to Lisa, you better be really sure of your information because this might end very badly for you. That was interesting, and then that kind of becomes reflected in the ending when we do get Lisa reacting very intensely against it, immediately calling her head of security and saying that she wants to go the distance with this, whatever that means. She repeats multiple times to her head of security that she's going to go the distance. And that kind of feels like Meredith called it, and that seemed like she foresaw that Lisa was gonna take this and make it into a big deal. And make a big show of being innocent and being scandalized by these accusations and getting the police involved.
Yeah, I think that Lisa was protesting a little too much. Like it seemed like it really struck a nerve to me. But one of the things that we saw there, this security guard is one of the things that I really love about Lisa Barlow as a housewife. The way that she frames calling in her personal bodyguard, but it's like, yeah, it's my security guard. It's my cyber security guard. It's just like this IT professional that not at all the way that she's like framing this. I really like that.
Yeah, she's just shouting into the phone like, wait, we need to go with the distance. We need to get you on this. And the person at the other end of the line is like, ma'am, can I have your account number, please?
Have you tried turning it on and off again? Well, let's talk about how this is presented. Actually, I just want to take a quick opportunity to tell our audience about our hotline. If you have a hot take or you disagree with anything that we're saying or want to voice your thoughts, give us a call at 1-833-927-0178, and maybe we'll feature your call on the pod.
Yeah, that's
Dylan,
a great idea. Why leave a mean comment when you could just ring us up and be like, hey guys, first time, long time. So what are you talking about, Lisa Barlow?
Dylan, tell us about the presentation here. What did you like about it?
The thing that like jumped out for me the most, that I liked the most, was the moment when Jared Osmond arrives at the party, which was great. That just really kicked it up to another level. I loved that. I'm really getting into this whole subplot of Brittany continuously not breaking up with Jared, and I didn't expect him to actually like come into the fold as a character, and now that he is, it just got better.
Yeah.
And I really like the aesthetics in that moment, because the party that we have, which is just a weird, like awkward party, like nobody quite seems to know what to take of their dress code, to dress like mafia wives or whatever. Like the cake is mostly just a black cake with the word mafia written on it. Like the aesthetic cues are really like unclear. But in classic Housewives party style, it's like very overlit, of course, because it exists to film a TV show in, basically. It's very white and bright and very crowded, and like the high def shots of everybody talking at once look like very, very harsh and chaotic. So once Jared arrives and then he goes out with Brittany to have a little head to head with her, we get a really stark contrast where when they're outside, at least when we're seeing Brittany, when we're seeing her side of the shot, it's black behind her. The focus is narrow enough that we don't really see anything beyond black, and a few little like blooms of lights completely out of focus in the background. You know, those little fairy blooms of just kind of lights blurred into just vague points of color on an otherwise black background with nobody else around. Such a break from what we had inside, which is just full of people, white, bright, to just being like blackness and stillness. It feels like a classic romance movie move to do that, to switch to when they're having a head-to-head, to have an aesthetic break, and for it to feel really like these two people are actually with each other and are actually alone. And it really drives home that Brittany is entering like a different headspace when she's out there, like where she's in this world that feels more personal, more dreamlike, but more real in a dreamlike way, like more significant. That really helps the audience understand her attachment to him as this being like this romantic world, that where she like, enters it and bathes in it. She feels like it's her space. There's something like dreamlike about it. And it's so different from the bright, chaotic, crowded other world outside. Without Jared having to do much, we understand that a lot through the aesthetics. And it's a classic romance movie move, but that really worked for me in that moment. I thought that really sold the moment and helped us understand Brittany's perspective.
Yeah, I think also there's a bit of a contrast there because, like you said, this grand gesture is something that we typically associate with romance, but in this case, it comes across as like very manipulative for him to just show up last minute to this party that she's at while she's trying to move on. It just comes across so manipulative. So the contrast between this like presentation, like you said, where it's very typical of this romance movie, and that's clearly how he envisioned this going down, and how it actually feels when he arrives. It's such a contrast, and I found myself like chewing on my hands because it was so awkward. It was amazing.
I mean, it is, you're right, it's exactly how Jared wanted it to go down, and it's how she wanted it to go down too, and he knows that, which is why we see also, we understand how he manipulates her, because he creates this space, which is, aesthetically represented by that dark romantic outside space. He creates the space, which is the space that she wants to be in. She wants to have somebody coming to see her and being like, here, let's step outside and have a moment together. But then he uses those manipulative cues, like by first making sure that she's in a position where she wants to be having this conversation with him, and then saying, well, do you want me to leave? Putting her in a position where, of course, she's going to say, well, no, I don't. Like that's like,
right.
He's looking for those weak points to make her say, I want you to be here. And by creating that space, he creates a place where like they can both kind of slip into a shared world, but also a space where he's in control, where he can make her say the things that he needs her to hear. And we understand how he can create a world that works romantically, and how he can create a world that's like his zone of manipulation at the same time. I think we understand a lot in that moment.
Totally. The thing that stood out to me in terms of presentation is something that we also got in the last episode, but we got another scene between Mary and her son. And the way that the blocking on this was like worked out, I really thought that it was heartbreaking. The fact that we've got her son, Robert Jr., and his wife like trying to slip into the house and sneak past, and Mary catches them as they're ascending on this staircase to get away from her. Their backs are like kind of shifted away from her, and they're very closed off. I think they both have hoodies on too, right? Don't they? Like they're both kind of hiding their faces, and it really like was a really good visual representation of how he is like slipping away from her, and the fact that there's this picture of him as a child right behind him as he's going up the stairs, and she's losing her son to presumably drugs, because they seem like high as balls, they can barely speak to her as she's talking, and Mary clearly has like no idea how to progress in that situation. I just thought that the blocking of it was really heartbreaking, because we saw him sneaking off and floating away from her, and she's just left there stuck on the ground, like she's watching this balloon that she once loved floating off into the distance. Really heartbreaking stuff.
Totally. And the like size of Mary's house like really plays into that, because you really get that idea of like she never even knows when her son's home or not. Like there's just these big open cavernous spaces that she's kind of sashaying through, and occasionally tries to catch a glimpse of her son ascending a staircase away from her at a distance. Like the cavernous space really sells that too.
Yeah, we get those like long shots of her walking down these long white hallways.
And that feels very dreamlike
like
too.
A ghost.
Yeah,
totally.
like she's haunting her own life in a way. Yeah.
So let's get a quote. Was there a quote that stood out to you here?
I mean, Lisa's going off at the end, and I love those Lisa moments. I really love when she's like, "Oh, I'm going to call in real detectives, not Whitney Drew. Oh, I'm connecting the dots, honey. You did not pass art or geometry or anything else. You should not be anywhere near dots." It's great. Just love the way she spins out that metaphor out of control and ending it on "you should not be anywhere near dots" is so great. Great Lisa stuff there. Yeah.
There was a couple interactions here that I really like in terms of how they kind of separate the cast from the real world. We get these kids that kind of stand in as proxies. There's that moment between Angie and Elektra where Angie says like girl power, and Elektra is like, don't ever say that again. And we kind of see how out of touch Angie is. And then there's a moment where Mary sits down next to the tweens and is like, that was such a conflict, my feet hurt, or whatever it was. Just so funny.
I love that moment where Mary, felt like such like a wedding kind of moment, like just like sitting down next to some random kids and being like, hey, how about all this stuff that's going on, right? And the kids just being like, I don't know who you are. And I think one of the girls like kind of tries to engage in conversation by being like, what happened? And Mary says, women.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay. I think I have to go to the bathroom. That was such a great moment. That was a great Mary awkward moment. Just deciding to sit with some random kids who have no business being in the shot and don't know what's going on.
How about strategy? What do you think is the most interesting thing strategically?
Well, I've already brought up what Whitney's doing. That's kind of the big thing that's going on here, I think. So that's definitely the most interesting one. It feels like this is not her first attempt to try to create a Meredith Lisa schism. I think that's been something she's been trying to look for a way to do from the start, and I'm not sure that's going to work out for her. She's definitely trying to go all in on this. I think like bringing the information to Meredith first in advance of having it blow up at the party is showing that she's really planning for this to be a big thing, and it's a big swing. So like credit to her for a big swing. I'm just not sure, like I've already said, like where it's going to go from here.
Yeah, I think that this is interesting. I think that her going against Lisa is, like I said, a better strategy than going against Meredith, which is where it seemed like she was initially trying to line the conflict up. So yeah, I'm curious to see where this goes. I think a lot of it is going to have to do with how Lisa ultimately responds. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think is pretty interesting strategically is how Bronwyn is operating. She really seems like she's figuring out how to move within this group really quickly. I think her decision to go and tell Angie what she has been hearing about Heather getting information around, I think that was the smart thing to do. She's picking a side here, and I think she's making the right call. I like that she's not just being this passive energy in the room, and she's bringing a multifaceted game here. So I'm really loving what she's providing.
Yeah, Bronwyn does seem really eager to try to get pieces of information and use them. She's, like you said, she's really come here to play. And I think we've seen that from the first episode. So good for her. I think she kind of got a taste of the difficulty of that. She has a couple of times, but in this episode she does, when she kind of like ends up between Angie and Heather. And it seems initially the crossfires, but then like Angie and Heather just kind of like burn it out on each other. Well, she's just kind of sitting at the table next to Millie or whatever her name is. Mealy, yeah, like that one, the other one, and and I feel like in that moment she sees both that, like, yeah, sharing this information is definitely gonna like put me in the crossfires, but also if I don't like make an effort to ramp things up and take sides, I'm just gonna get pushed to the side as soon as things get real. Because like they have enough like history with each other that they'll just short circuit across me, even if I'm the one who put them in contact. And I feel like that's kind of what we saw there. Like both that like the heat comes back to her, but it doesn't stick to her. It goes between Heather and Angie, and she ends up just kind of on the side. I think if she wants to do something that really sticks and that really has an effect, that really shakes up the dynamics in the group, she's going to have to figure out a way where she's actually implicated so that she doesn't just get pushed aside as soon as the drama gets real.
But Angie did kind of need to rely on Bronwyn for backup there. Like I think Angie has a lot of strengths as a housewife, but like close quarters one-on-one combat I don't think is necessarily her strong suit. So she immediately kind of runs back to Bronwyn and involves her, and I think that just brought them a lot closer and solidified the lines of the conflict a lot more. So yeah, I feel like this ultimately shored up her position quite a bit. I'm curious what you think about Heather's position here and as a result of all of this.
Yeah, I don't know. Heather also doesn't seem to be like very deeply implicated in like the central dramas, so I'm kind of interested to see what she's planning to do going forward. I do like that she wants to kind of be a person in the know, like almost this power broker figure when whatever his name is, like Erin or something, the guy that Brittany brings in, the guy who's not Jared. She's like immediately makes a big deal about knowing him and having kissed him. She really wants to be somebody who like knows everyone, and I think we maybe see a bit of anxiety about losing influence or losing status within the group. I think in those moments, because I feel like she needs to kind of solidify who she is and what she's doing in this season.
Yeah, but there's also conflict brewing between her and Mary, and we see it come to a head a little bit here, which I think that Heather actually did a pretty good job of firing back at Mary and undermining her argument, because Heather is right. Like, Mary has never liked Heather or been good to her, so like she doesn't owe her anything. I think that's a pretty good.
Sure. And it was the right move when Mary's like, you lie everywhere you go, you leave a lie, and then Heather's like, name one lie, and Mary can't do it, like she really kind of called her out and being like, okay, give an example, provide specifics, and Mary just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't talk about Whitney's husband, Justin. He was a bit of a puppet master here. He was the one that texted Jared in order to invite him to this party. And then we see him kind of get into it with Lisa and her husband Sean at the end in defense of Whitney. I like it when the husbands get involved and get messy. I think that as long as it doesn't dominate the show, it adds a lot of like flavor. We're so used to seeing these women get into conflict with each other. It can almost feel like white noise at times. So once the spouses get involved, and especially if they're not as camera ready as the women, it feels a lot more real. Like, their emotions take over a lot more. They're less savvy to the game and more reactive because they're taking it personally.
Yeah. Also, Lisa kind of had to drag Justin into it. Like, I kind of was wondering, like, what's Justin doing here? Like, when Lisa's going off, he was just kind of standing off to the side. Then she went to him. Like, Lisa went to Justin and got him involved. It was kind of like, all right, hey, wake up. This is your turn to step into. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And we were kind of left at a cliffhanger involving the husband. So it's going to be fun to see what happens in next episode.
Who are your stars here?
You know what? Lisa Barlow, number one. It was classic Lisa stuff, very quotable. Like I mentioned, she also said something like, maybe if you were actually making your own jewelry, you wouldn't have time to fabricate this bullshit. Just like good Lisa metaphors, just how intense her blow up is at the end, and just like, I'm calling security, I'm calling the police. Just very, very funny. I just thought it was a great reaction, just a great reaction to Whitney, just to take it to that level and to just like refused to tone it down was very entertaining. So I'll give her a first star for that. I'll give Mary a second star. Lots of weird Mary stuff going on. The moment with her son was kind of heartbreaking. You're absolutely right to single that out. So this was a good Mary episode too. Give her a second star, and we'll do a third star for, I might as well do it to Whitney since she's the one making the big play here. So you got to reward her for making that big swing.
Yeah, I think those are good stars. I think they'd be my top three as well. I do want to give an honorable mention to Angie, who I think she picked a theme that wasn't Greek. It was mob related, which kind of
Greek
ties
mafia.
into the Greek mafia thing, right? It wasn't Greek themed. It was mob themed. So she's got a lot of things going on for her. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just love Angie, so honorable mention.
We should also give an honorable mention to Garzai, the bearded man who shows up and posts.
Her associate. Yeah.
Did we learn who he actually is? I don't think we did. It was just like, this is Garzai, he's going to be taking care of these ladies by putting wanted posters on their doors. kind of a mixed metaphor there, but I just like that this random bearded dude named Garzai just shows up and then disappears, and we never get an explanation of who he is.
And the posters were a good prop keeping in line with Angie's, love for a physical prop.
Yeah,
so,
keeping her on-call prop guy busy. Yeah.
Before we move on to Real Housewives of New York City, just want to take the opportunity to tell our audience to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you are watching this on. Leave a little bit of a comment or a like or whatever, and tell us your thoughts on our hotline. It's 1-833-927-0178. Super easy to remember that number. 1-833-927-0178. We'll feature your call on the show and talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. Dylan, let's get into Real Housewives of New York. Want to give a summary of what happened here?
Yeah, everybody's planning to make food at the Hamptons for Erin's Shabbat thing. And as various ingredients are collected and assembled, a lot of the attention's focus on Ubah and Brynn having an increasingly serious conflict, which gets a little heated near the end.
Yeah, I got to be honest, this was kind of a mid-episode for me. I was not super engaged with this. I'm curious, what your thoughts.
I've been really enjoying the season, so I've been happy with this one too. But yeah, it was more low event, I think, compared to the previous couple episodes, which were a little more just studded with content. I really, really enjoyed the conflicts we got near the end, but it kind of took a long time for some stuff to actually happen, I guess.
Yeah. What did you think about the presentation on this episode?
Yeah, so not being in the Hamptons is not as much fun as being in New York City. I've talked before on this show about how much the aesthetics of New York City really give some extra juice to this franchise, and that's one of its strongest suits. So the fact that we've been in the Happenings for a little while now is not as fun aesthetically for me. It's not as much of an interesting world to inhabit. If I was going to call out just one thing in terms of the choices being made, I did really like that. I think especially near the end, there's a lot of shots of Brynn where there's just her in it. Like when we have them all sitting around the table, most of the shots of other people are two in the frame, or maybe there'll be one in the frame and the camera pans over to another person. The camera's including multiple people. Most, if not all, but the majority of shots of Brynn are just one shots, just her. So there is a shot choice in there that isolates Brynn, that underlines the feeling that she's alone, that she's feeling separated from other people, that she's feeling not part of the team the way the other people are maybe part of the team. So that's one choice that stood out to me as being well considered. Generally, it's just very well shot, the stuff around the table. It feels both dynamic, and also we get to spend enough time in the characters that we see their expressions and stuff, and really check in on everybody, so we have a sense of where everybody's at with everything. Really well done, well edited, well shot. But there does seem to have been an explicit choice to try to isolate Brynn a little bit more in the shot choices and in the edit, and that worked well for me.
Yeah, and also I feel like the way that Erin's kitchen and dining area is laid out is so great for having this depth. We see at the very end, they're able to create isolation between Brynn and the rest of the girls at the table, plus even more isolation from that group and Sai and Ubah, who are back in the kitchen. Everyone is within this same space, but they're able to create different levels of isolation, and it really, like you said, it's really evocative because you can see how Brynn feels isolated from everyone else, but there's still people on the periphery that are there supporting her, whereas Ubah and Sai are disengaged from the rest of the group after this big falling out, and they're just puttering around the kitchen. So yeah, I think that it was really well constructed space there.
Yeah.
Another thing that stood out to me in terms of presentation here is more a structural note. And one thing that I think that these shows don't get a lot of credit for is their ability to incorporate kind of game into the show for different effects. And I mean, we often see party games like Never Have I Ever be used for the sake of drama. In this case, it was used to strengthen bonds within the group and let us get to know the characters. But there was also another game that we saw where they were in the grocery store and they structured it like a game where they're guessing prices for things. And it serves a dual purpose in terms of showing potentially how out of touch these women are from the day-to-day realities of people who are not as affluent as them, but also how kind of out of step that location is from the realities of the day-to-day Americans. And, you know, there's like soy milk that is $12 or whatever.
Yeah.
Everything is just this ultra expensive variant
a
of
dozen
some
eggs
common household.
for $8 American. That's wild. That's insane. I'm sure they're free range farm eggs, whatever. That they still should not cost half that much. Like, that's wild.
Yeah. So I thought it was like a really effective use of game in here, and I think that's something that these shows do really well. Often we'll see it used just for creating drama. They'll have a game where the sole purpose is to stir shit up, but we see it used in a couple different ways in this one episode, and I really like that. I mean, even we got tennis as a game that didn't get really a gamey treatment.
No, because nobody could hit the ball.
Yeah. I'm sure it would have been used as a game if anyone could actually connect.
Yeah, I'm sure they wanted to, but yeah. Erin's like, these bitches don't know how to play tennis. And Erin looks terrible too, but she has a leg to stand on because she actually makes contact with the ball. We never see anybody else even succeeding so much as getting a racket on a ball, which is pretty funny. Ubah had a great line too, where she's sitting next to Jenna and she's like, I don't think we're safe here. Just balls flying everywhere. I also really enjoyed Jessel's line where she's like, I'm British, I play cricket, and like, I'm sure you don't.
Yeah.
and B, you're going to be really surprised when you find out where tennis is from.
Yeah. There was a little bit of a thematic note, especially early on in this episode, that I thought was interesting. We got Racquel talking about her relationship with her dad being non-existent and her like feeling of abandonment, and that resonated with Brynn because she similarly has a strained relationship with her father, who's passed away now. But we saw the all showing how these women and their fathers, the father-daughter relationship being really tense here, or strained, or non-existent. And then we see Jessel talking about how much she wants a daughter, and everyone gathering around her telling her how much she would be a great girl mom, and how the relationship between mother and daughter is very special. So I kind of like that as a bit of a contrast, kind of comparing these two very different parental relationships.
Yeah, it was a pretty good moment with Racquel, and it was kind of a good and harmful moment when she was saying like, I don't want this man's last name, so I'm going to take your last name, Mom. And she's like, no, my dad sucked too, so let's try to find something further down the family tree that we can pick from. Let's see how far back we have to go to find like one man who wasn't terrible.
Let's get a quote. What quote stood out to you?
You know what? This is a bit dereliction of duty, but I don't think I didn't write down any quotes. Like Ubah had some good stuff when she was getting really worked up at the end. But like any specific lines from that, I'm not too sure. What do you got? Do you have something specific?
Lots of stuff about licking buttholes was in there. Sure. Jessel talking about Racquel's vagina earrings. Jenna telling a story about a legit sex dungeon.
That was Jenna's Jenna's always got these great stories of being like in New York in the 90s. Like I've always found like just you feel like she's lived like 15 lives when she's always just like randomly like, when I was dating a New Yorker staff writer and he had to do a piece on sex dungeons. Like we didn't get a ton of Jenna in this episode, but you could always count on her to just drop in some random story where you're like, damn, where did that come from?
Oh, we got Jessel talking about shredding cheese being harder than giving a hand job. So I don't know how much vigor she approaches either task with, but it was an interesting comparison. Let's talk strategy. What stood out to you in terms of strategic decisions that happened here?
The person who's interesting me the most in this episode is Brynn, and I think what's interesting about what we're seeing from her in this episode is not not so much her strategy in terms of like what drama she's trying to cook up, just in terms of how she's approaching the forum as like a way of just presenting yourself. And we see like how she's really trying to like give pointers to other people about how to do it, because in a short span we see a couple instances of that. Good on the editors, I think, to just include a little moment of her talking to Rebecca, and she's saying something about like advising her to like clap back at the other girls, like, oh, if they tell you things about your wardrobe, just say like, I have a clothing line, like you've got to hit back and stuff. Like she just we see that she's like really actually seems to be interested in trying to like tell other people how they should present themselves on camera. And that leads into the discussion about the conflict that she had with Ubah, that Erin was maybe a party to, that we didn't actually get on camera, which I appreciate. I like sometimes there being like conflict points that aren't things that happen on camera, that just have to be reconstructed in the aggregate through the things that happen in later discussions combined with confessionals. I like when conflict moments have to be reconstructed instead of actually shown. But a really interesting conversation from what we can tell, where she was trying to instruct Ubah or give pointers to Ubah about like her on-camera performance, and according to Brynn herself, said something along the lines of, if you want Oliver to marry you, you should be careful about coming off as an angry black woman, which is a very like loaded and thorny thing to say to a friend. Even, I'm sure it came from a good place. Like I think Brynn is honestly, I believe that she's honestly trying to offer pointers to other people on the show from a place of friendship and like wanting everybody to look like their best selves on camera. But you see how trying to tell people how they should present themselves is like a very thorny thing to do, and can like very easily be read as an inappropriate intervention into your life and interpretation of your character and your presentation. So I'm just really interesting to start to see Brynn more and more as somebody who is like very engaged with notions of how people are being presented, and just engaging with the form not so much as like gamesmanship as like a PR person, as being like, how are you going to come off in camera, and I'm going to help coach you because I think that I have like the best ideas about how people should be presented and what plays well for the camera and stuff. That was the thing that was like really interesting me the most, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw this posted on the Bravo Housewives subreddit, and people were roasting her for this and talking about how it was inauthentic, and maybe showing this on camera, this moment where Brynn gives coaching to Rebecca as being like a warning shot from production to like keep it real, keep it authentic, because otherwise we're gonna give you a bad edit and show you as being fake. But I think that you make a pretty good point that it does seem like it is coming from a place where she does actually legitimately care about people. At least with the example that we saw with Rebecca where she was coaching, that did seem like it was coming from a genuine place. I am less convinced about the conflict with Ubah, whether that is coming from a place where she genuinely wants to help, or if this is her kind of saving face in the confessional and it was meant to be kind of shady or inflammatory in some way. I could definitely see that being the case, and she's got plausible deniability to be like, no, I'm coming from a place, like a helpful place, but it was actually because she feels hurt by Ubah and wants to strike back. We saw, I think it was the last episode, where Ubah identifies the fact that Brynn likes to put conflicts behind her and find new conflicts where she has better footing in order to get her revenge, where she can make herself be the victim or be like the hero as opposed to playing the villain. This could be an example of that, where she has an off-camera conversation that is able to create conflict, but she has enough plausible deniability to be like, no, I was genuinely coming from a place of helping you. And I think that like, I don't think that this was entirely selfless. It didn't really land with me. So I thought that this was kind of like a rough moment for Brynn, like that this is the central seed of this new conflict with Ubah. I don't think that it's playing in the way that she is hoping. So she's going to have to kick her PR skills into overdrive with that, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it's a rough moment for her too. And I don't think that her intentions are necessarily what's at issue. Like I say, I'm willing to believe that her intentions are right, but who cares what your intentions are? Like, it's how it lands. And right. I'm not in the best position to like talk about the politics of presentations among Black women, but it feels like it's not the greatest advice to be like, make sure that you're not conforming to a racial stereotype, or the person who loves you will love you less. Like, no, like
totally. Yeah.
You know, like if Oliver would like Ubah less because like of some racial stereotype, that's 100% his problem and not Ubah's problem. I get that it's a TV show and it's all about how you're presented, but I think using that kind of talking point when providing advice to somebody that's specifically attached to their personal relationship is kind of a thorny thing to do, and is going to come off bad. And I think if Ubah was stewing about that and that kind of like kept her up at night thinking about it, that's understandable. That's totally understandable. So yeah, I do think it came off bad for Brynn, regardless of what her intentions are, right? They'd like just the effect of it is more important than what the intentions are. I think that Brynn gets a little out over her skis in terms of thinking that she is like a PR master, that she does like know what is good presentation and what isn't. I think she's maybe a little overconfident in her skills there. In terms of the discussion that she has with Ubah, like, I think everybody's right when they realize that Ubah's in the wrong for not letting Brynn speak. You know, Ubah says something like, I know what you're going to say, so I don't need you to respond right now, which is obviously not a healthy way to have a conversation. And Ubah was doing a lot of talking over her and stuff. But what I appreciate is, I've talked about this before, is that these women really kind of smother their disputes with love language, and like will just kind of announce that they've decided to end a dispute by being like, but I love you and we love each other and we're going to hug and this is all coming from a place of love and everything's love. And which is
I only fight like this with someone that I love so much.
Yeah, which, you know, toxic statement, by the way, but that's like how they tend to like just kind of announce this dispute is over. We're no longer going to argue about this because we're just going to say that we love each other so much. And I don't think that's great because they're not following through the arguments to the end. So the one thing I do appreciate about Ubah's approach here is that she refuses to do that, right? Like, as much as Brynn and other people are trying to do that for the conversation, Ubah keeps restarting it and keeps being like, you know, but this is why I think you're condescending. This is why I think you actually are a snake. And this is why I said that. And I'm going to say it again. And I'm going to say it again. Yeah. And I'm going to say that you hurt me again. And I'm going to say that I think you're condescending again. And I think she's definitely a little too intense in the sense that she's not letting Brynn speak, because she's making it too much of a rant and not enough of the discussion. But I appreciate that Ubah is not taking the bait and being like, we're just going to say we love each other and bury it rather than actually dealing with it.
Yeah, totally. It seemed like she came into that conversation using that language, and then it immediately turned into a conflict. She's like, oh, we're so good now, and we're good because I fight with people that I care about, and I care about Brynn even though she's a snake. And it just like immediately devolving into conflict. I really love that.
Yeah. And Jenna's like, can we go back to that we love each other stuff? And Ubah's like, no. I'm back to calling you a snake now, okay?
What other highlights did you have from this episode?
I don't know what Jessel meant when she said that like what Jenna was wearing looked like part of a truck or something. I don't understand that. What was she trying to say? That was bad. Was she trying to say she looked like a bin bag? Like she looked like a black plastic garbage bag that you throw in a garbage truck?
Yeah, I don't know.
She didn't express that
like
clearly
recycled
enough.
Tires, or I don't know.
Just the vinyl siding on I don't know. I don't know what she meant by that. It was classic Jessel, like failing to land anything. Nothing she tries to do ever lands. She's just like, the image of her trying to hit a tennis ball and it going like 3 feet away from her is like most of her interactions on this show. God bless her. You know, the prank was that prank they played, that could not have gotten better though. That was actually honestly a prank that carried out carried out beautifully in the sense that you had the best possible reaction that two people are vomiting simultaneously. And Ubah's actually laughing about it afterwards, when I kind of half expected her to want to kill everybody involved afterwards. But no, even despite puking her guts out of the sink, Ubah was like, that was hilarious. So that's like the perfect prank reaction. You get like that kind of extreme result, but nobody wants to kill you after. They're actually laughing with you about it.
Yeah, and polar extremes too, because while we've got, two people throwing up in sinks, we've also got this image of Jenna Lyons with this fake cockroach like licking the cream off of it.
Yeah.
In this like latex outfit. Yeah, really really fantastic. When I saw the like fake cockroach, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be the lamest thing. But yeah, you're right. It went as well as you could hope.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? This was a great episode, actually, because any episode you have two people simultaneously vomiting, it's a good episode.
Yeah. In retrospect, I am, revising my review. I feel like this was pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we covered most of my highlights here. Who are your stars?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about this one. I've been, in the early episodes, I've been really smashing those like Jenna Lyons and Sai stars buttons. Like I've been loving them a lot, but we didn't get a ton of them this episode.
Yeah, we were a little light on Sai in general on this episode, aside from her,
to its detriment.
Vomiting.
Yeah. Maybe my first start at Ubah. Like, I don't love the way she reacted, as I've already covered. I don't love the way she handled that conversation, but I do love her intensity, and I love her dedication to talking through it. And to try her best to express how she feels. And so, yeah, we get a lot of high energy, worked up Ubah, and I'm happy with that. So I'll give Ubah my first star. And I'll give my second star to Brynn, because she comes off as a very interesting character for the reasons I've discussed. I think that we're starting to understand a little bit more of her psychology, and I think that now the way that she feels increasingly isolated there, the way the camera shows that in that dinner scene, but also the way that we see her kind of hiding in her room, like lying in bed, like not wanting to go out, considering leaving, talking to her brother and considering just leaving. She's in a very vulnerable position, and being in a vulnerable position makes us see a little bit more of how she ticks, of who she is. And that's becoming pretty interesting. So let's give Brynn a second star there. Let's give a third star to the Pavlova that Jenna Lyons makes. Even though we have to hear the word Pavlova a bunch of times, Pavlova is the new shakshuka. This is it's impressive that she's going to a high degree of difficulty dessert, while everybody else, understandably, as you usually do in a dinner party setting, is going for pretty safe, easy to succeed on, potatoes and sauce, rice and beans, pretty easy to carry off recipes. And Jenna's going for a pretty delicate kind of dessert dish. So let's give a star to her dessert there. The Pavlova looked pretty good. It was a little chippy. It was kind of falling apart there, but that just might have been because Erin was too eager to bring it out with a cockroach underneath it. And still looked tasty.
Yeah, I feel like maybe she was using a high degree of difficulty dessert, or something that requires a lot of attention over a long period of time, as a bit of a social crutch here. I find that's something as an introvert that I will typically gravitate to something that I can, I'm doing this thing. I've got this activity that I can fall back on to remove myself or use as a crutch in social situations. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. But I think you nailed it with the stars. Number one star being Ubah / Brynn. I think 1A and 1B. I think that those are both the most compelling people on this episode, obviously. And I want to give another star to Racquel, who I think is being really vulnerable on camera. And I just really appreciate that she's open to doing that.
Yeah. I do think, just to jump on what you were saying about Jenna making kind of a time-consuming, high degree of difficulty dessert as kind of a social crutch and a reason to be in the kitchen a lot, that's a great point. And I think that Brynn really picked up on that and used that as a moment to have time with Jenna and to try to get closer to Jenna. Like she kind of sees that's what Jenna's doing, and it's like, oh, well, the other girls are shopping. Can I help you? Can I hang out in the kitchen with you? Can I ask to wear your diamonds? Can I enter this like semi-private space with you? Because I see that you're kind of looking to create a semi-private space for yourself. Can I just slip in there with you, and then we can kind of strengthen our relationship and kind of comfort each other in that space? I think Brynn really picked up on that and kind of saw that as an opportunity to draw ourselves closer. So I think that was actually a smart read by Brynn's part too, to try to strengthen their relationship.
Totally. Well, I think that about does it for Real Housewives of New York. Dylan, you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
Yeah. As long as it's still October, I'm still going to be talking about horror movies all the time. And I used to do a horror movie podcast. It's called Mind Over Splatter. There's 3 seasons that you can look up. So if you're looking for some recommendations for horror movies to watch, or just want to hear some guys break down in obsessive detail various horror movies, you should probably check out Mind Over Splatter while it's still spooky season.
Awesome. I'm Craig Midwinter. You can find me on chess.com, Craig J. Midwinter. Add me as a friend. No one has done it yet. You could be the first. Take me down. I'm on social media at Bravo Outsider on Instagram and on TikTok. Again, we've got our new Hot Take Hotline, 1-833-927-0178. That's toll free in US and Canada. Tell us where you land, Ubah versus Brynn. Tell us who you think is in the best position on Salt Lake City. Tell us what you like about the presentation on these shows. Tell us whatever's on your mind. We'll talk about it on this pod. It's just a voicemail, so don't be afraid of me like picking up the phone. You're not gonna have to talk to me. Anyways, that's Bravo Outsider for this week. Until next week, keep on wifing.